Hi, people. This is DJ.
This is Ish.
And this is
Season
season 3
3
of Pero Let Me Tell You. What was it, Loose?
Oh, Loose. So
Promiscuous boy.
Yeah.
No, I like the other one. Oh, you don't
What
nothing at all to me.
I don't remember any of the names of those songs, but yes.
That's, why can't I remember?
Right, because you know what? When I think of Nelly Furtado...
Say it right.
That's right. When I think of Nelly Furtado, I always think of frijoles negro.
Why?
Because
Frijoles negro. She's Canadian.
she's Portuguese. She's Portuguese-Canadian, and...
I think of her as Canadian BC, British Columbia.
And in the video for Turn Off the Light, or whatever, where she's like, turn on, there's a scene where she's like stirring un tremendo caldero de frijoles negro, and the camera zooms in on it.
Well, there we go. And with that note, we are going to start. Pero let me tell you, welcome everyone. What episode is this?
Welcome to our actual episode 113.
Oh yes, after the snafu of last week.
Yes, the snafu. But you know, we don't want to miss a week of giving you guys content, so we did a little mini episode. Mm-hmm. You know, to fill your the pero size hole in your heart,
because
it was so good.
Our live show was really good with Daniel Leiva and with Luis Aguirre. It was so good. And I mean, we had a lot of people that chimed in, which was great. And
if you were one of them, thank you.
And it was exactly what we wanted. People were like, you know, giving their opinions and stuff like that. But then it's like, oh shit,
I know.
Instagram failed us.
Damn you, Mark Zuckerberg.
So welcome everybody. Welcome. So well. It's been a quiet few days, not?
You know what?
I'm exhausted.
Es que ya yo no sé qué hacer.
Okay, what was it? Australia was on fire in January.
Right.
Then we had the killer hornets.
No, then the coronavirus.
Then
the murder hornets.
Then the murder hornets. Now the protests.
Right.
And it's like, oh my god, it's June. I am sure that by November we're having aliens come down. Then they're leaving.
Do you think they want to be on the show?
An alien on the show?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we are the show about inclusivity and Hispanic and Latinos, and we all start off as aliens. So yeah,
I think we're putting it out there. Aliens, all the grays or whatever.
Yes, but not if you are Independence Day type aliens. No.
I know, that's so many tentacles. Plus, I don't know where to put the headphones.
No, we want the aliens from Spice World.
Yeah, because it'd be fun. They like
you like how I brought that in,
because clearly they enjoy having a good time.
Yeah, I bet you nobody's referenced those.
Forgot those existed. Not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. I didn't see that one coming at all. At all. Hey, you're very lucid for somebody who's on several drugs right now due to a toothache.
Oh my god. And then there's the toothache of 2020.
You're very sharp for somebody who's taking.
So, ladies and gentlemen. I was going to say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Oh, anyway.
There's the drug kicking in.
So, I have a toothache. Tengo tremendo dolor de muela.
De muela, yes.
And I have never really had a toothache before. I mean, I've had braces, I've had oral surgery, so I'm no stranger to being at the dentist or the orthodontist. But I had a feeling. My fillings are from when I was 8 years old. And
8 years old?
8, yes. They're from, and I've never, thank God, had another cavity.
Wait. ¿Pero a qué edad tú mudaste los dientes?
I don't know, but mine are from like when I was 8 or 9 years old. Because I remember when I got them, and I was 8 or 9 years old.
Wow.
So one of them, after 30 years, was like, I'm done. So now I have like nerve damage, and the toothache is killing me. But I'm on 800 milligrams of Motrin while I speak to you all, or gel and Tylenol. We take switch.
You alternate. Yeah.
Why couldn't I think of the word alternate?
Well, because you're very sharp and lucid, but you're still on drugs. So I mean, it's a balancing act.
Things may get a little blurry.
They get a little loopy.
But but I've never. Have you ever had a toothache like that?
Not the way you described.
No, because you would remember.
Right.
It is agonizing. I was crying yesterday, or whenever.
I mean, I've known you forever, and I think maybe I can count on like one hand the times I've seen you cry. So
yeah, I mean, I tolerate pain really well, and I don't bitch about it. I just take it.
Right.
But like this, I was crying because it's like right there, and
there's nothing you can do about it
and then
because
your ear starts to hurt, and like your neck and your head, and I'm like,
no.
I'm like, this is what Tom Hanks felt in Castaway. And that didn't end well.
No, well, he got off the island.
Yeah, well. But, hopefully I have to get a root canal. But we're not going to talk about that now. But, so everybody, welcome to The Real, episode 113.
Yes.
So as everybody is listening to this, and thank you for listening, are you guys on your commute to work? Are we working?
I'm still working from home.
I'm officially starting to work from the office full time as of this week.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
because the thing with us is that everybody else has reopened. So
in the building?
No, like insurance companies.
Oh, duh. Yeah.
In my line of work, courts
yes.
have opened, although they're still virtual hearings.
Right.
Courts have opened. Other attorneys' offices opened. People have gone back to work. So then the amount of volume that we're getting,
right.
I mean, we have to.
See. Yeah, your world has
reopened,
opening,
so we have to. So. Anyway, there's a lot to talk about this week, obviously. Our motto is listen, laugh, and learn. And honestly, I know we like to bring the laughs with our podcast, but
I will try my damnedest.
I really haven't felt like laughing.
I have, in the sense that like I need it. And so I've been watching a lot of like old sitcoms.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because I need that release.
Like, even, not that I post a ton of stuff on Instagram, but even posting something on Instagram, like, I find, like,
it's frivolous.
It's like tone deaf, like.
Yeah. I started posting shirtless selfies again this week.
Oh, well.
But it took, listen, I was absent for like a week and a half.
Well, that is an eternity for you.
It is an eternity. And I came back because I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, it is pride. And I am, self-confident. So I'm going to post shirtless selfies.
I love how your connection to pride, and because you do this in every single other occasion and holiday and event of the year. But I love how you just stuck pride in because
Well, when I go out dancing, I'm always shirtless.
Okay, once again. So that is your excuse.
That is my excuse.
Okay.
I'm sticking to it.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I need to follow that whole pride thing a little bit more. Maybe I'll start posting shirtless.
You should.
Selfies.
Listen, it's fun. It's fun.
I need to follow that,
Free the nipple.
Anyway, so, let's obviously talk about the, big old elephant in the room. So, I mean, we've had a couple of episodes already talking about the state of affairs right now.
Yeah. And we promise listeners we're not going to become a dour podcast, but, we are going to have to touch on things as they're happening.
Yeah, I mean, this is what
but
we do, right?
Yeah.
And this is kind of predominates everything right now. So this week, the majority of the protests were last week, and that's what our live episode was about. This week, there have been continued protests.
There were some here yesterday.
No, they've continued. They're protesting everywhere, and they've all been predominantly peaceful,
right.
which is great. But obviously, this week, and as more days pass, we start with the reckoning with we're protesting, we're angry, we want change.
Right.
What's next? What are we doing? So there's obviously some stuff that has come up, and one of the things that I really want to discuss with you about is, and this is not the first time this has come about, but among the many things that this week kind of resurfaced, or a lot of people are talking about, are Confederate monuments.
Yes.
And Confederate, statutes and all that.
I was hoping you'd bring it up.
So
NASCAR has officially said that they're banning it.
What do we think about that?
Well, I think it's about NASCAR or about in general?
Well, in general.
Okay. Because I have opinions on both of them. So I guess I'll start with NASCAR first and foremost. I mean, in my day job, I actually, at one point, NASCAR proper wasn't my client, but the racing industry was. Mm-hmm. And I will say that was a very big concern when we were trying to put together a plan, and really from the client themselves, really were, again, based out of South Florida, trying to appeal to that Hispanic, Black consumer, because they what they were seeing.
When you mean Hispanic black, do you mean like Afro-Latino or Hispanic and black?
Hispanic, black.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Consumer, because what they are seeing is that the older white fans, quote unquote, they are dying out. You know what I mean? They're getting older, they're dying out, and there's not really, nobody's really replenishing it at the speed that they need to, no pun intended, to continue having those ticket sales. So obviously, if you're in South Florida, you want to start appealing to those minority markets. You do have some Hispanic racers. You have a black racer that I know of only one, but he's the one that's most prominent right now. Bubba Wallace, I believe is his name. And, you know, one of the things that when they would do their focus groups and things like that with minority groups to say, well, you know, why don't you come out and this and that? Across the board, the perception was always it's a white people thing, it's a Southern thing, it's Confederate flags,
right?
It's racist. Now those same people would then turn around when they got to the event and say, "Wow, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was actually
the perception. It
was actually more inclusive than I thought it would be." And again, I'm speaking about the event in South Florida. Right. So there's that.
Right, because just
because by
all
population wise,
all 100 white people that live in South Florida.
No, yeah, people come from all over because the races that were here was up until last year.
These are, I imagine, the Homestead Speedway.
Yeah. Up until last year, the race that was here was actually the last race of the year, so it was a championship. Okay. So people would come from all over the country.
Oh, okay.
But
gotcha, because I was going to be the 100 people white people that live in Miami-Dade County go to
they're all there. All 100 of them are there. But you know, but that's, you know, I think that illustrates that when you have focus groups and they're asking you about NASCAR, and the response is that's for racist redneck people with Confederate flags. If you want to continue to grow your business, you have to do something to stem that perception. Now, you can't tell people not to come to your event, right? Because at the end of the day, you're looking to make money. But you can start to distance yourself from certain symbols, which is what they've started to do as of this week. You can't bring it into the the track and things like that. Already one racer has quit. I forget his name right now.
Okay,
as a protest.
He has a right to quit.
In all fairness, he has had 0 wins in his career, so it's not like it's a big name.
I've said this before on the podcast. You have a right to be a racist bigot.
Yeah, knock yourself out. Knock yourself out. So I applaud NASCAR, and I maybe because of the exposure that I had behind the scenes, the peek I had behind the scenes, I knew that eventually this was going to have to happen because you cannot continue to grow your business in a country that, you know, and I don't remember the numbers anymore at this point, but where Hispanics are going to be the majority minority and blacks, you know, minorities are going to continue to grow.
Yeah.
So if you don't do something to at least demonstrate your business
demographic
is listening to this, good luck. You're going to be out of business.
Yeah, your demographic. Not only is your demographic shrinking, but that demographic is also evolving.
Right. So you may still have, you know, the quote unquote good old boys who love to go to NASCAR, but they're not the same kind of good old boys as before.
Right.
You know?
So
so that's my feeling in terms of the NASCAR thing. With regard to the overall removal of the Confederate flag and things like that, wouldn't it be great if I told you that I'm totally against it?
This is going to be a 5-hour show. People brace for impact. You're going to need to drive to Canada if you want to hear the whole argument. Because my rebuttal is going to be like...
It's going to have footnotes. No, I mean, I'm completely for it. But I think, you know, and you and I have had this conversation before, which is most people's argument is, you're trying to erase history, right? That's like the first thing, right? Everybody always like, well, you're trying to erase history. And it's like, no, we're not. Because you've even said it, you're like, I don't think that these statues and these monuments should be destroyed necessarily. They should be put in a museum. Or, in the case of a monument that's too big for a museum, create like a park, you know, that's about...
Make a museum, whether you add it to the Museum of Black History in Washington, or you make a museum to slavery. I think slavery
or a Civil War museum,
or a Civil War museum. I think slavery should have a museum the same way the Holocaust does, because people need to go to that museum and see the horrors of slavery, and not only the horrors of slavery, but how slavery affect. We are where we are right now because of effects from slavery. So all the racial issues that this country has had and continues to have stems from slavery. Right. So put it, because some of these monuments, like the monument of Robert E. Lee in Virginia, is a beautiful monument in terms of it's
part of history
behind it.
And it's history.
Okay, go ahead and put it in a museum.
Right.
So I had a conversation with my mom about that today. Okay. And
I love when you have conversations with your mother, though, because I feel like they can go one way or the other.
Yes.
Because sometimes your mother kind of admits that she's not fully... She doesn't have the background and the education about a certain topic, and she kind of wants to hear about it. And other times it's great because she just goes off on a rant.
Yes. So my mom is 70, and my mom is from another country. My mom doesn't really speak English that well. A different culture, a different time. I don't expect my mom to know American history. Right. My mom's extent of American history are the questions she had to learn to take the citizenship test. And as we know, those questions are like, what are the colors of the flag?
Right. Who was the first president?
Who's the first president?
Right. Who freed the slaves? Yeah.
That type of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't expect my mom or especially an older immigrant, somebody who immigrated to the United States
as a proper adult,
older.
Yeah.
I kind of give them a little bit of a not a free pass, because I think that you should.
But you understand.
Learn. But I understand, especially when you're an immigrant and you come later and you're raising your kids and you have like 2 jobs,
feed a family.
You got to feed a family. Yeah. You're not thinking, let me
sit down with this history book
on American history, right? So I sat down with her because she point blank asked me. She's like, ¿de qué habla Nancy Pelosi de quitar estatua? What is she talking about? Nancy Pelosi about taking off, statue. It's like, why? What's the big deal? Why now?
Right.
And I tell her, okay, sit down. I tell her, listen. So you have to know American history. You have to know about slavery, and you have to know about the Civil War. This is what the Civil War was. This is why we had the Civil War. When the South lost the Civil War as a morale boost to the people in the South, as a morale boost to themselves. Right. They erected all these monuments of Robert E. Lee, of all these
almost as martyrs.
They are as martyrs,
right?
About all these Confederate generals, and that's they also named a lot of streets and military bases and all this stuff as like a morale boost to themselves.
Right.
And I gave her the rundown as to like, this is what it was. It was about slavery. This is why they did it. So she's like, so those men that they have the statutes on, she was asking, were people who were for slavery? And I'm like, yes, they fought for the Confederacy.
Right. They were treasonous.
They fought for the Confederacy. And she's like, and the Confederate flag, the flag, because my mom knows, my mom's reference to the Confederate flag?
Dukes of Hazzard?
The Dukes of Hazzard.
Well, yeah.
Because when my brother was a little kid in the 80s,
like everybody,
he loved the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah.
So that is my mom's only reference.
She's like, pero si esos muchachitos estaban de lo más nice.
like she had no point of
who doesn't like John Schneider?
Yeah, exactly. She had like no point of reference. This is why. Right. I know it sounds cheesy and it sounds like an after-school commercial, but knowledge is key and knowledge is power. Because if you don't know history, you don't know where you've been, you don't know why you are where you are, and you don't know where you're going. Yeah. Right? And I explained to her, this is what the flag means. And she's like, espérate un momentico. Esa bandera es de un grupo, parte de países fue de los Estados Unidos. And I'm like, yes. Right. Y todas esas estatuas son estatuas de personas que querían la esclavitud. And I'm like, yes. And she's like, pues que las quiten todas. Pues que las quiten todas. Porque ¿quién quiere ver eso? Eso es como que en Cuba, cuando Cuba se libera, pongan una estatua de Fidel Castro. And I was like, hot dog! We had a breakthrough!
But that's
know when you go to therapy?
Yeah, you're like, this is the breakthrough moment. This is the breakthrough moment.
My mom had a breakthrough.
But it's funny you say that, because I was thinking, I did myself a very big disservice today, which was a former guest of the show, Enrique Santos, posted about the Confederate flag thing. And, as we said when we interviewed him, his fan base runs the gamut. Right? So he posted about it, and I'm like, you know what? I've got 10 minutes before I have a conference call. Let me just go through the comments here. And it ran the gamut of everything, but my feedback to those people who say things like, well, but you can't get rid of history and it's about culture and it's about this and that. I actually started looking to see how much it would cost because I would love to, okay, you feel that way? It's a part of history, right? And there are people who agree with it, even if you don't, right? Mm-hmm. So it shouldn't be taken down, right? I would love to, in the middle of Hialeah, put tremenda bandera del Che Guevara.
Oh my God.
A ver qué pasa.
Oh my God.
Because then when they start to get upset because of what that represents, then you can turn around and say, and that is why black people have a problem with the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
I
have a problem with the Confederate flag, and I'm not black.
I have a problem with it, but I don't have and I can't. I'm not black. I won't have that.
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're African American, it has a different effect on you than if you're not.
Right.
But I just think that anybody who's human should be offended by what it represents. Right. And, the reason why I bring up my mother.
They don't allow imagery of Hitler in Germany.
The reason why I bring up my mother is because if I was able to, in 5 minutes, and again, she's an immigrant. She doesn't know American history. I mean, you really don't, because this is unique to American history. Right. You can't expect somebody from another country.
Drop me off in the middle of France. I won't know. The nuances.
You can't expect them to know the detail of American history, because a lot of these things people don't even think about, like these, like here in Miami,
Dixie
Highway. I bet you
it never dawned on me.
95% of people never thought that the U.S. one was named Dixie Highway because of the Mason-Dixie line.
Right.
No. Right. I bet you nobody thought about that because it's something that's just so mundane.
And it's just always been there.
And it's always been there that you didn't necessarily jump on it.
Right.
But when you know the historical content and it's explained to you, then you say, okay, I get it. So that's why I use the example of my mom, because when I sat down, I love my mother. She's my mother. But my mom is not the most... My mom doesn't go around with thought-provoking, that's not her realm history and all that, But when you sit down, even to somebody who doesn't know history and really is not into history, when you sit down and you explain it as a human, you're like, wait, what? Those were people that were pro-slavery? Take it down, right? So that's something why I just have a hard time understanding why people can't understand that. That's like, for example, and this is something that we as an American society, part of American society, has normalized and thinks it's actually cute. Have you ever really stopped and thought how offensive Civil War reenactments are?
No, because the South always loses.
But it's offensive.
I don't know.
It's between battles.
Okay,
but
genuinely, I'm genuinely asking why do you find it offensive? Because you're
recreating the people who do that are in the South, right? And generally, they recreate battles in which the South won.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right, because it's a war. There was a bunch of battles within the Civil War, and the South won many of those battles.
Okay. In that respect, yes. Okay.
Yes. So it's like, are we gonna do reenactments of the Holocaust? Like, no. I mean, this is ridiculous. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, and somehow people find that amusing. Like, it's like amusing in some way, and for people who defend the Confederacy and defend that, it's my heritage. They defend
it as a culture almost.
It's my heritage, but you can't. And I see the point where there's people who are proud of the Confederacy as heritage and culture that has nothing to do with slavery. But the thing is that it does. You can't remove the slavery aspect of the Confederacy. You just can't.
Caballero.
It's not about being Southern.
Right.
Caballero. Mint juleps are about being Southern. Blanche Devereaux is about being Southern.
Julia Sugarbaker is about being Southern.
Not.
I'm just gonna say, and maybe this will put la tapa pomo of the topic or whatever. I'm just gonna say there's a reason that is the preferred flag adornment of the KKK.
Yeah, and actually, do you?
I mean, they're not going out there and trying to use the pride flag.
Interesting tidbit. Do you know that obviously in Germany, there's a law that it's illegal to display the swastika?
Anything Nazi related.
It's illegal. Do you know that when skinheads and neo-Nazis march, they use a Confederate flag?
Really?
Yes, they do.
So therefore...
Right. But that's why I'm saying... The argument a lot of people make that...
And I guarantee you that in Germany, they're not making mint juleps.
It's my heritage because I'm Southern. Right. Pick another symbol of Southern heritage. And
use
Southern
the Georgia State flag.
Which has a Confederate flag in it.
Oh. Well, then maybe not.
But whatever.
Use a picture of Delta Burke.
Listen, there's a million things that you can pick to be the symbol of Southern culture. Right? And nobody's taking away that there is a Southern culture. Right?
You know what? Let's just make a flag with Dolly Parton on it.
I'm fine. I'm totally fine with that.
Which she had to change the whole setup of her Dixieland Stampede a couple years ago.
Yeah, because of that?
Because initially it was the Confederate versus the Union.
Oh.
And all of the games that were played, the audience was separated into basically the North and the South. So they've changed it now. So it's red team, blue team, and all that.
I think that, it's not that we are more sensitive. I think that it's a reckoning. There's
also something to be said for hindsight. You know what I mean? Like the further you get away from something, the more you see it clearly.
Hindsight, we have to fix the wrongs.
Right, but that's what I mean by the further away you get from something, the more clearly you see things.
Right. Well, yes, that is true. I don't necessarily think that's the case here because I just think that it's clear that slavery was wrong. I just think that, the people that defended slavery especially was for economic reasons, which I think makes it even worse. But again, pick another symbol of your heritage because you can't disconnect that symbol to slavery because that is the symbolism of slavery. And another thing, which is very basic, but so a lot of these people that are America, are racist and are I'm white, and I'm all about America and guns and God and
I want you to do an entire episode with that voice.
No. And all about all that America. It's anything that deviates from their train of thought,
their perception of America.
Anything that deviates from their perception of America is anti-American. And it's okay, do you realize that the Confederate flag is the biggest symbol of treason to the real America? Because do you forget that the reason why the Confederate flag exists was because the South seceded from the Union? They seceded from the Union. They did not want to be part of the United States.
They formed their own country.
They formed their own country, with their own president, and their own
their own everything.
Everything. Yeah. That is full-blown treason. That is you think that it was treason when we left the monarchy. This was full-blown treason. But yet it is the symbol, these people use it as the symbol of America. That is real America. It's what?
Compared to what?
It's that makes absolutely no sense.
Also, the beauty of it is that, America is, again, America is all about we're the best, we win, we're the best, we win. And yet you're walking around with the losing side. Yeah. That would be like me having a shirt with Justin Guarini.
Hey, Justin Guarini was good.
I know, but come on.
I love Kelly Clarkson. I love her. But I actually thought Justin Guarini was going to win.
I have his album still.
So do I. It was actually really good.
Some of those songs are so good.
Was one heart too many. Do you remember that song he has with Kelly Clarkson?
The duet.
It was such a waste that they used that.
The telepathic duet from Justin to Kelly.
Yeah, no, that they used it for that movie because it was such a good song. That's wedding song material. Timeless. It's called Timeless, and only us can be talking about the horrors of slavery and the Confederacy and stem into American Idol with Kelly Clarkson. You know that Kelly Clarkson. In her show, do you ever watch her show?
I don't because it's in the middle of the day.
So in her show every day, she does
a cover. Yeah,
she does a cover. And even now in her Montana sessions, she's been doing covers. Okay. I think she should have an album of all these covers because they're so damn good.
Maybe they're on Spotify.
The other day she did a prayer y se la comió. It was so good. And I'm she's doing this virtually because her band
Oh, wow.
Yeah, se la comió. She's so freaking good. I love Kelly Clarkson. But yeah, Confederates, you suck.
I mean, I don't
And if
know.
there's any people that
That like the Confederate?
that are pro-Confederate and you
I
want to
can't
stop listening to us,
imagine.
go ahead.
I mean, I can't imagine their make up a big constituency of our listeners, but
Yeah. So what do we think about?
I will say this though. I will say, I'm all for calling out racism, and I'm all for getting rid of the monuments, entre comillas, right? Whatever that winds up being. But I will also say that I think we have to also monitor ourselves for the slippery slope of it all, because it's very easy to go from the Civil War, generals to, well, Washington owned slaves. Well, do you know what I'm saying? So I just think we have to.
That's an argument for another day, but here's the thing, and I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here. This is the learn section of Listen, Laugh, and Learn.
Which, oh my god, I learned something about Washington and Jefferson the other day that blew my mind, even though it makes total sense.
Okay, which is?
Have you noticed that the majority of the people who have the last name Washington and Jefferson are black and not white? And it's because they gave their name to all of their slaves. So as a result of that's why there are so many black people with the last name Washington and Jefferson.
I did not know that.
I mean, it kind of makes, like, if you know history, especially with Thomas Jefferson, like, it's like, oh shit, yeah, that makes sense. But think about it. Very rarely do you come across a white person whose last name is Washington.
No.
George
George
was a descendant of Thomas Jefferson,
who probably raped his slave. But anyway,
Yep.
This is why you got to know history. I've said this a million times, and I've said it a few times here on the podcast. The United States is a great country. It's the land of opportunity. It's the land that our family and our parents came to for a better life. It's the country everybody comes wants to come to. And I'm very proud of being American. But we need... the United States and our society, we need to come to terms and to a reckoning that as wonderful as our country is and the story we're told about our country, the United States was born with two fatal defects, and that was the decimation of Native Americans and slavery. And this is why this is a very complicated issue, because, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, yes, the argument is that they were men of their time. Slavery was socially accepted at that time, but it doesn't take away from the horrors of it.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not like, oh, well, slavery was accepted at that time, so it's okay you were a slave owner,
right.
And you raped your slaves and, all that. We'll give you a free pass on that one. Right? So it's like a reckoning that you have to have, which makes these things very delicate and very, very difficult to talk to. But that's why we're talking about it.
But that's why I say we have to sort of monitor it because...
like, for example, what is more patriotic than the Star-Spangled Banner? Our national anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know about the Star-Spangled Banner?
I know Fergie butchered it.
Okay, so... whatever possessed her to make that into a sultry saz,
like a scat number,
jazz number. It's like
it's hard enough to sing.
It's like, let's go ahead and cover the national, let's sing the national anthem. Let's change the arrangement and turn it into a cabaret jazzy, like torch singer song. It's like, man, somebody was ill advised.
Yes.
Anyway, the Star-Spangled Banner, which, as we know, is written by Francis Scott Key, is a poem. And the part that we sing is the first stanza of the poem.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. The second and third parts are about catching runaway slaves.
Oh.
Yeah.
I knew nothing of this.
Oh, yes. That's why there are a lot of people, predominantly, African-American, who don't want to stand up for the national anthem. And I completely get it. I completely understand how
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna look it up later.
Yeah. The history behind it.
See, listeners, I learned too.
So Francis Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem. So what happened was, and I'll be very brief. After the American Revolution, the revolution didn't stop there. You had a lot of battles where England was trying to take back what was now the United States, and the biggest of those battles, what we know as the War of 1812, where the British invaded the Redcoats, invaded
it's a whole power veer,
invaded DC and burned the White House down and all that nonsense. And a lot of Redcoats, which were the British soldiers, told slaves, "Hey, come fight for us. We're gonna treat you better, and when we take back the country, we're gonna free you." So a lot of slaves joined the British side. So Francis Scott Key, who hated slaves and hated, on top of that, he hated slaves.
He hated the British.
He hated the British. I mean, this was like the perfect trifecta. He hated black slaves. He hated the British, and now they were treasonous.
Right.
So it was like the perfect trifecta. He was like, "Fuck this." He wrote the Star Spangled Banner, and the second and third stanzas are about runaway, like catching, like, "Hey, runaway slave, you're not gonna like get very far." So it's things like that we as a country have to know, and we have to reckon. So when you hear people say the Star Spangled Banner is racist, and it gives me, certain feelings, and it's offensive to me for these reasons, you have to be like, okay, I get it. I understand why. There could be an argument.
I may not feel that way, but
there could be an argument made whether you should change it or not. That's a separate
for another day.
For another day. But you have to understand that. You have to understand that these founding fathers, which I don't like to call them the founding fathers, I like to call them the framers of the Constitution, because there was already systems of government here. But
that's true, Jamestown.
But anyway, these people, they all owned slaves, and they were terrible to their slaves. And yes, they were men of their time, and yes, it was accepted back then. But it doesn't make it any less terrible.
Well, it doesn't make it right. No,
it doesn't make it. It doesn't make it acceptable. I think, right? But again, these are the things why you have to know history. In this case, particularly American history, because people will get on their soapbox and be like, whatever, and then you don't know the context of things, and you don't know why things are the way they are. Why are there like a dozen military bases that are named after Confederate soldiers? How did that happen?
Also, not a good reference. Again, they lost.
Yeah, how did that happen? So I don't know. I think these are things that we need to fix. And, obviously, is that going to solve all of our problems? No. But
you got to take steps forward.
But you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere.
And it's sometimes it's the little things, in the grand scheme of it all, the little things, right? That speak volumes, because they do demonstrate that you're willing to listen.
Of course.
That you're willing to listen, and you're willing to admit to certain things, and you're willing to, lack of a better word, compromise.
So going on that, I'm sure you probably heard that Gone with the Wind has been, for now, pulled.
I have such an issue with that.
Well, you have an issue because it was pulled.
Yes.
Okay, but it's being brought back, but with a historical context.
What does that mean? Like pop-up video?
Well, no. Probably at the beginning of the movie, there's going to be some type of
the same way that Whoopi Goldberg gave little intros, for lack of a better word. Because there's a lot of Warner Brothers cartoons that, again, products of their time, right, have racist overtones. And so there was a whole collection that came out a couple of years ago that Whoopi Goldberg did the intro to, explaining the context. This was created at this time.
Right.
This was what it was. And, and so you're watching it, but so you understand the framework.
Most people that I've read upon this, one of them being Whoopi Goldberg, because she was very opinionated about it on The View the other day. Most people don't believe the movie should be discarded and thrown in a vault. They believe that it's a very important movie, and especially Gone with the Wind from a technological sense.
Right.
It was a very advanced movie for its time.
Also, first Black Academy Award winner.
Yeah, but again, history. Hattie McDaniels.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first African American to win an Academy Award, and she wasn't even allowed to sit to. I don't know if she was like outside of the
or she couldn't sit with her co-stars.
She couldn't sit with the other nominees. So it's like
context.
Shit. Yeah, she was the first winner, but look at what they put her through.
Yeah.
To get the Academy Award. But no, they're gonna re-release it, and it's gonna have. I don't know if it's gonna be somebody speaking something, or if it's just gonna have like maybe some type of writing, like Gone with the Wind was produced in 1939, blah 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 blah, whatever.
Right.
I actually agree with that. I
mean, I don't disagree with adding it, but I disagree with pulling it.
Well, I think they pulled it because they're working on that.
But you can do that as a rolling thing. It's not like HBO Max has that much content to begin with. Because to me, I see it more along the lines of I'm probably wrong, but of like censorship, where it's just like, if you do not, it is there. If you do not want to see it, you do not need to see it.
Well, it is censorship. It technically is censorship.
And I hate when people take it upon themselves to say, I'm gonna pull this so you don't see it. As opposed to letting me as an adult make my decision.
It is. I agree with what you're saying, and it is. If they would have pulled it outright permanently, and just like the movie, if they would have pulled a Song of the South, you know about Song of the South, right?
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about in a minute, from Disney, I would have had a different opinion on it, but it's going to be back on, but just with the historical context, which I agree 100% with them doing that. Did you hear about Lady Antebellum? The band?
They're changing their name?
They changed their name to Lady A.
Because the Antebellum South.
Right. Because also, again, these are very tricky
things that I didn't even think about.
Antebellum, a lot of times, is a term used in architecture.
Yeah, it is.
This is an antebellum home.
Right, and because of the time period.
Right. The houses look a certain way. And that was why they named their band Lady Antebellum.
Right.
Because I think that when they first started or they were rehearsing, they were in an antebellum home. Right. So,
and they don't strike me as particularly racist.
Yeah. So they said, out of respect to the historical content of that, because really antebellum is kind of glamorizing the South.
It's a style of the plantation, right?
Well, yes, but it's really used. The origin of the word was to describe the antebellum South as in the Civil War, like around pre-Civil War.
Pre-Civil War, correct.
When slavery was
legal. Ante before.
Right. So that's why it's a little bit problematic. Well, it's very problematic. It's just that in more modern times, it's been used as a form of description of architecture or buildings. Like, like here in Miami, there's a strip of buildings in downtown in front of the federal courthouse that I believe are the only antebellum buildings left in Miami, which, I mean, imagine.
Wow.
So they're very old.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably why, and they didn't really put too much thought into it.
Again, Dixie Highway. We don't think about it.
The word sounds, antebellum. The word sounds, interesting.
It's pretty. It's a pretty word.
But this is what the word means.
Right.
So... And they did it on their own free will. So I give them a lot of credit for that. They did it on their own free will. They did what I thought was right, what they thought was right, and kudos to them. Yeah. So I mean, these are just. Well, this is an evolution of society that should have happened. Well, first of all, it should have never happened because slavery should have never happened. But
okay, it did.
But now that it did happen, this is something that should have happened ages ago.
Right.
But I guess good that it's happening. At least that's happening now.
Yeah, better late than never, I guess.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, if I gotta find,
is that the parting gift?
That's my silver lining here. That's my year supply of turtle wax. Better late than never.
But also the good thing about it is, which I feel that every time that one of these like racial matters happen, one of the silver linings is that those damn racists, you could see them louder than ever.
Oh, Lord.
Let me ask you something. Not that I expect you to know because you're not a racist. Why are racists so damn nosy? Se están metiendo siempre en lo que no le importa. Did you see that lady who called out the Asian girl?
Yes, you tagged me on it. You tagged me. The lady was the poor Asian lady was stretching. She was stretching on the thing. My favorite part of the whole thing, because she's okay. For those who haven't seen it, this Asian lady was stretching on. She was jogging in a park. Okay, she was stretching on like these stairs, and apparently you can't see it because the video itself is from it's like the Asian woman is, I guess, doing like a selfie. I don't know what she's doing, but you can't see the stairs. But apparently there's like multiple stairs that are leading down from, I guess, above down to the footpath. And on one of them, she is stretching. And this old lady just out of nowhere just starts and like, why are you here? Why do you think you own the stairs? And she's like, but ma'am, there's like all these other stairway entries you can use. Oh, why don't you just go to the gym? That was my favorite part. Where she tells her, why don't you just go to the gym? It's like, why do you care where she does her workout?
So nosy.
Also, gyms are closed right now because of the coronavirus.
Yes,
so you know what? She can't go to the gym even if she wanted to.
California, I don't think California has.
No, they're not. It's like, listen, she probably does CrossFit. Okay, she's and she.
But why are they so nosy? Like Karens are so nosy.
They're the worst.
Karens can keep. It's like go with
the
your
other
white supremacist self to your house and talk all the gibberish and crap that you want.
You saw the other one, right?
What?
The one in the gas station.
Which is the one in the gas station?
De la mujer que le metió el gasnatón a la racist.
Oh, yes.
That she starts like, where are you from? Go back to your country. And she's like, I'm Native American. Where are you from?
Yes.
And it was like, oh, well, awkward.
No, and that lady, I think that lady even had a Karen haircut.
Of course she did. They all do. Like, I felt it when she got slapped. It's wonderful. Wonderful.
They're so freaking nosy racist. I'm telling you, siempre se están metiendo en lo que no le importa y siempre tienen que meter la cuchareta. Más tarde o más temprano. It's like, mind your own business, racist.
They're probably all very big fans of that ABC show, What Would You Do?
I've told you till this day. Every time I see that show, the commercials, what would you do if your man is at home crying alone in the bedroom floor because he's hungry and the only way to feed him is and the man is gone.
Oh, Lord.
Till this day, where they're like, what would you do? You know what's funny? When I think about that show, and I watch that show every now and then, I always think, and you know me, that I'm all about like the higher road and like doing what's right. And like, yes, I would totally.
You like to think you'd like,
yes. Yeah. And I'm like, would I really get in their business? Like, I think that I would. I
probably wouldn't unless it's like a situation like si le están entrando a pescozones. You know what I mean? Like then I might have to evaluate the situation.
There was one, I don't know, I saw some time ago about like this lady that was like on purpose being really mean to a child and being like, you're a loser. And I'm like, mija, that's being grown up by Cuban parents. That's like,
que tú vas a ir y estudiar qué?
Like, that's a Tuesday at any Cuban kid's house.
Oh Lord! Speaking of growing up Cuban, this week's guest is comedian Chris Garcia, and some of you may know him for his comedy. He's been on Two Dope Queens, among other things, but he also created a 6-episode podcast called Scattered. And the entire 6 episodes, each one's about 30 minutes, is telling the story of his father's affliction with dementia and eventual death. And how him and it's not a spoiler because it's called Scattered, him and his family, his mother and his sister, go to Cuba to scatter his father's ashes. And in between it tells us, the history of pre-revolution Cuba, his father's, stories about his father and his experiences in Cuba that just were never really told because of the trauma. And it's a beautiful story, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now, you'll notice that Darian is not in the interview. That's because ese día you were at the dentist. Literally, you were literally at the dentist while I was doing that interview.
So yes, ladies and gentlemen, while you're hearing the interview, I was sitting I was texting him like pictures of me at the dentist. So I'm like, you're interviewing, you're doing an interview, having fun, and I'm here con el dolor de muela.
So, after a word from our sponsor, Chris Garcia.
Hey everyone, this is DJ from Pero Let Me Tell You, and I'm here to tell you guys about Manscaped's latest product. You've probably heard us talk about the Lawnmower 3.0. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go back to the garden because Manscaped just released the Weed Whacker. You know, if you're like me, you hate those nasty ear and nose hairs that just pop up, are gross, and they're just so annoying. And that is where Manscaped's Weed Whacker comes in. A nose and ear hair trimmer that uses proprietary skin-safe technology and a 360-degree rotary dual blade system to help prevent, any of those nicks or snags. You don't want none of that on your ears and nose. And it's a great product because it will take care of it and you'll be all nice and trim. And the timing is perfect because it's a perfect Father's Day gift. And now that summer is here and we could finally get out of the house, you want to be nice and clean shaven and all trimmed up. So how do you get this product? Just go to manscaped.com. And when you're there, use promo code PERO20 to receive 20% off your order. That's right, 20% off your order. And Manscaped is even going to include free shipping and handling. So come on, this is such a bargain. It's a great value and it's a great product. So that's right, 20% off using promo code PERO20 for Manscaped's Weed Whacker nose and ear trimmer. So what are you waiting for? Go to manscaped.com and order yours today.
And we're back. Bueno, mi gente, as we said, this week we have a very special guest. He is a comedian, a Cuban-American comedian at that, so, might be a little relatable to us. His name is Chris Garcia, but more than just a comedian, he also created a podcast that tells the story of really his father's life and his parents' journey from Cuba to the U.S. And, the name of the podcast is Scattered, so I don't think it's a spoiler to say that it goes all the way through his father's passing and going back to Cuba to scatter his father's ashes on the island. So I'm just giving you guys a heads up. I listened to this podcast twice, cried both times. I call it the Selena factor, which is where I know how it's going to end. Doesn't matter. Still gets me. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah. So, as I said, you're a comedian, I guess by trade, if not quite by degree, because by that you're a poet. But to tell this story, most people would think, well, it's a story about his father. His father's passing. Your father suffered from dementia and Alzheimer's. It doesn't seem like there's a connection there, right? It's like, it's the funny guy, and yet he's telling the story that some would interpret as being inherently sad. How did all of this come about? Like, the decision to say, this is something I'm going to do.
It came about all very naturally. I was booked to do this live show of this podcast called Two Dope Queens here in Los Angeles.
Great show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's 2 years ago. And on that day, my father had been in hospice care. Mm-hmm. And he was sick, and a nurse called me and said he had pneumonia for the third time.
Oh, wow.
And that it wasn't looking good. So I went to hospice. My mom was in Miami, in Hialeah at the time, taking care of my grandparents' house. Mm-hmm. And then my sister was out of town, so it was just me. And I spent the day with my dad, and it was real sad. Like, I had those conversations with him about, thanks for everything. I'm sorry. Like, I was having these last conversations with him, and it was a crazy day. And on the way home from seeing my dad, I found out that the sitcom I had written for Fox mm-hmm. about me and my dad wasn't going to be made.
Oh, shit.
And I was like, fuck this day, man, this sucks. And then I was like, I'm not going to do this Two Dope Queen show. Like, I don't feel funny, but mm-hmm. something about it, I got something about being a performer and a comedian. Like, I felt like I got the bat signal. I was like, you have to do this show. But I was running late. So I came home.
Like a true Cuban.
Like a true Cuban. I was running late. I came home and I didn't have time to shower. I put on a sport coat. And I don't wear a sport coat. I looked like I was going to a job fair. Like I was out of luck. And I go do this show, and they interview some famous people, and then they have some comedians that no one's ever heard of. It's like a good mix. And so I go to the green room, and the first person that I see in there is John Hamm, the actor. Wow. John Hamm, Don Draper.
Yes.
And I look like I'm on the streets, right? And I see John Hamm, I'm like, fuck this, man, this is stupid. Like, I was like, I hate this guy. He's so beautiful. He made me feel terrible. But I put that all aside, and it was also maybe 6 days after the inauguration. It was a lot of things.
A lot of emotions were happening.
A lot of emotions, and I just got on stage. I usually think out my act and make a set list, but I just let it fly. Mm-hmm. And it was a set that it just came out of me very purely, and the crowd, it resonated with the crowd, and it was a very nice, to this day, one of my favorite performances that I've ever done in my life, because it encapsulated a moment, and instead of running away from it, I kind of leaned into the moment. I talked about my dad, I talked about me, I talked about all this stuff, and then my dad died 6 days later.
Yeah, on Super Bowl Sunday, right?
Super Bowl Sunday, which really fucked up the Super Bowl for the rest of my life. Like, I hate the Super Bowl, and it's just terrible. I can't look at Tom Brady's face anymore. It's a tough day. But anyway, WNYC, the studios who produces the Two Dope Queens podcast, they didn't know my father had died, and they had asked if they were like, we were really moved by your set, and would you consider pitching a podcast to us? Like, is this something you'd want to do? And I was like, my dad just died, and so I don't have anything right now. And so they were like, I'm so sorry, we're big fans. We know you tour. If you ever travel anywhere around the country and you want to record something, let us know and we'll come to you. Wow. Right? So that summer, I happened to be on tour. I was performing for Samsung. The company just had me go to different places and perform for their
You were doing like
staff.
Like the CEO tour, like.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't have a Samsung, but money's nice, So I was touring, and I was going to Miami, and I was like, Mommy's in Miami. She's in Hialeah. I haven't been to my grandma and grandpa's house since I was 3.
No, you were right when you said abuela.
Yeah, my abuela's house. I was like, it's abuela. It's really abuela's house. But I went to abuela's house, and I hit up WNYC, and I was like, I'm going to go to Miami, and my mom's going to be there, and it's a grandparents' house, and can I interview? Like, do you guys want to come out? And they flew right out. They flew to Miami. It was 2 producers from WNYC, and they just showed up. They met me at the hotel where I was staying, and then we just drove to Hialeah. And then from the moment we got there, my mom was like, "Oh, hey, Christian, what up?" My mom was just like, my mom is so relentless herself. She was like, "Niño, ¿qué pasa? Como mango." She was like all excited, and so we took a tour of their house, and it was hilarious. There was over 70 mangoes in the fridge. There was a machete closing the workshop.
Well, of course there was. What else are you going to use? Especially in Hialeah.
My grandpa was using it as a lock for his work shed. Like, he had just a machete right there instead of a lock. And I was like, that's so funny. And anyway, I sat down and talked to my mom, and we spoke for 7 hours.
Just you and your mother.
Just me and my mother. And WNYC was just sitting there the whole time. And me and my mom, we have a special bond. And she's the funniest person I know. And she cracks me up, And so I love talking to her. And she was just on it. She was not shy. She was like, "Oh, I'll tell you everything." And so naturally we talked about my dad passing away, and stuff like that. And so we talked about that. My mom told me some things I had never known about their life in Cuba that she's always kind of blocked out. And then, and then at a certain point I was like, "Mommy, if Papi was alive for 5 minutes, what would you say?" And she was like, "I'd fuck him." I was like, "Mommy, how?" And she's like, 5 minutes isn't enough. I was like, "How long do you know is enough?" She's like, when it starts, you never know when it's going to end. She was just like, and so it was a very vulnerable conversation where there was these moments where my mom was just on fire, being funny. And then, but also it was very tender and very vulnerable, talking about my dad. And through our conversation, it came up that my father's dying wish was to be scattered along the coast of Cuba. And my mom was like, "I'm never going back." She was like,
right.
"Fucking no, Miami. And I was like, Mom, we can't do it in Miami. Dad was not a Miami guy. Like, he didn't like Miami.
Really?
Like,
okay.
My dad's like, he wasn't into like, he wasn't super like joyería and stuff like that.
Okay.
Not super cubanismo,
Okay.
And so,
Con eso me lo dices todo. Okay.
yeah. Not flashy, but he liked Miami, but I think he loved Los Angeles because that's what he wanted to work in aerospace, and he wanted to leave Cuba. And in Hialeah, it's hard to make that boundary.
That's true. It's really northern Havana, Hialeah. Yeah. It really is.
So I was like, no, Dad wants to be scattered in Cuba. And Mom's like, she's like, there's people having sex in that water. She was throwing all these crazy things. And so we didn't know what we were recording really. And I had a wonderful conversation with my mom. And then I was like, I'm going to be in San Francisco doing stand-up next week. If you want to interview my therapist. And she was like, who is this guy? I was like, I don't listen to podcasts. I've been on a couple podcasts, right. And I've listened to myself on This American Life for 10 minutes. But other than that, I don't have experience with podcasts. I've listened to WTF a couple times and so, like a handful of things. So I was like, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was like, can we interview my therapist?
Right.
And then,
am I podcasting now? Like,
yeah. That's what you do. You're sad in a microphone.
Right.
Like, yeah. So my therapist was great. And it just happened very naturally that the story presented itself that this was a story about taking my dad's ashes back to Cuba, and talking my mom through it and her facing this horrible past that a lot of our parents and grandparents refused to acknowledge or return to, understandably, because of all of the trauma that they had faced. No one wants to go back. No one wants to see it. First of all, they don't want to be reminded of it. Right. Second of all, they don't want to see it desbaratado, They don't want to see. They're always so sad. It's going to be so sad when you see it all crumbled and stuff like that. And there's a lot of excuses in there, but it's legitimate reasons too. Yeah. But as I continued to talk to my mom and I talked to their old pastor, all these people from the past, my mom started warming up to the idea of actually going to Cuba, because when we first started recording, it was not in the books. My mom refused for the first years or so of us recording this podcast. But I didn't want to push her too much. Right. But one day I was finally like, Mom, what are we going to do with your cenizas? She was like, no. She was like, no, I want to be donated to science. And I was like, wow. No, Mom, I think we're going to incinerate you. She was like, no, people, no quiero ser, no. She was like, donate me. Todo menos mi cosita, eso para papi.
Oh. My God. Like it's dirty. It's dirty, but it's sweet, right? Like the thought of it is like she's being naughty, but it's just like you want to go like, oh, que linda, like
I know.
And I mean, having listened to your show, I will tell you, I'm surprised your mother didn't just say, pero si yo no me voy a morir, que tú estás esperando, que tú estás hablando de que me vas a hacer cuando me muera. Si yo no me voy a morir, like I'm hearing her voice say this,
I know, totally. But I was like, no, Mommy, we're gonna cremate you. So should we put you with Dad? And she was like, no. And she was very insistent. And I was like, then I think maybe we should do what Dad wanted with his remains. And she was like, you got me.
Le diste la vuelta.
And so she was like, I'm gonna pray and I'm gonna think on it and stuff. And then she came back and she was like, let's do it. Yeah. And the whole experience was the most incredible experience of my life. To go from the sadness and sorrow of my father dying, right. And the last 10 years of his life were tough because my dad had an amazing memory and he lost it because of Alzheimer's. Yeah. So I didn't get to have those conversations that adult children have with their parents. I didn't get to hear about Cuba, and I would ask him so much. I didn't get to hear about a lot of this stuff, but through this process of going back to Cuba, I feel like not only did I get to learn all this stuff, I got to appreciate it, and I got to make good on my dad's sacrifices by taking him back there on his own terms.
Right.
Like, why would he want to go back? And he's like, no, I'm the boss here. I'm going when I'm dead. You can't do shit about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I mean, después de lo que, what he went through in the camps and in Mazorra, it's, I can understand how it's like, you know what? It's almost like his final fuck you, right? To the regime, in the sense of like, I had to leave, but I'm gonna come back, and when I'm gonna come back, you're not gonna touch me, motherfucker. Like that, and there's a beautiful poetry to that.
Yeah, and so and as soon as we did it, I was like, this fool's a genius, because I was just like, saw my mom, I saw my dad's sister, who we never saw after he left Cuba, and my mom and my tia were best friends. Just to see my tia's hand on my mom's shoulder as they scattered I was like, Papi did this. My dad was so smart. He wanted them to be together in Cuba on their own terms, for us to all get to know each other, and it was just amazing.
Yeah,
and
I mean, the beauty of the story, and it's only 6 episodes, so it's not like it's this sprawling investment, because sometimes people say like, I don't have the time to listen to it's like, it's 6 episodes, 30 minutes each one, but you pack it in with a lot, man, because in it you get the story of your family, the history of Cuba, really through the revolution. You get history of like aerospace, you get ultimately, this beautiful love story between your parents, which is really what I think just brings it all home and makes it relatable. They went through so much, and yet they stayed together. And it's like you said, your father and your mother were madly in love with each other. To this day, I'm sure your mother is still madly in love with your father, right? Even though he's no longer physically there.
She's still having dirty dreams.
Well, you know what? Listen, let's talk about your mother for a moment, because I know that you're the narrator and it's about your father's, his struggles and all that. But the real star of the show is your mom.
Yeah, she's the real star of the show.
She is, I mean, every tia, every prima, everyone that we, if you're Cuban, if you're even Latino, I would say to an extent, but I can only speak to Cubans, right? Hearing your mother speak to you and hearing your mother express herself, I knew who she was.
Yeah.
Like, I knew this woman. And I just want to say, first and foremost, next time you see her, tell her this strange person in Miami is sending a hug to her through you. And that if we ever find ourselves in the same place and there's a Pitbull concert, I'm totally taking her.
That's awesome.
Because she will be a trip and a half, I'm sure.
Yeah. My mom, I will make sure to do that. My mom is an angel. She's so tough. She's little and she's very funny. But the thing that's most amazing about her is how tough and resilient she is. She loves to remind me that she lost her virginity to my dad and that they met when they were 50. And she's dirty. She's like a dirty insult comic. She makes fun of me. She makes fun of all my friends. And it's almost a cover up of how strong she is, because at first you would be like, oh, who's this wacky, raunchy lady who's very quick on her feet and very charming. She's so charming. She gets away with everything, but
well, she's under 5 feet tall. Of course she's gonna get away with everything.
She's tiny and she knows it and she uses it to her advantage. But the story is really a love story about her and my dad, and just how resilient they are, and how they took that all the way to to my dad's grave and beyond. Because my mom they've been so committed to each other in the story. You'll learn, from the sugarcane camps to Mazorra, to going to Spain, to here, and all the ups and downs of America through Alzheimer's. And here, you just don't see that type of love anymore, or those types of relationships that go beyond 50 years that were still like, and they were still hot for each other, and
How old was your father when he passed?
My dad was 76, 75.
Okay.
Yeah. 75. And my mom, she's 75 now, and
How dare you say her age out loud?
Oh, I know, yeah. Yeah. Pero soy tragadora de años. So, you know,
Bueno, okay.
You know?
Bueno. Then you know what? Listen, she's always going to one up. She's always going to one up.
Yeah.
Always. No, but you're right. You know, those are stories that, you know, you don't see nowadays. And you know, I said earlier that I've listened to your show twice now, and both times, you know, I've cried. Actually, the first time, I was literally listening to the last episode in the parking lot of a Publix, con tremendas ganas de ir a mear, and I refused to leave because I was like, no, I've only got like 5 minutes left, and I'm like in tears. I'm in my car. Like, whoever saw what was happening, they were like, what is wrong with this man? Like, you know, call the authorities. But one of the reasons that it resonated with me is actually about 2 years ago, I lost my grandfather, who had dementia as well. And it wasn't as long as your father's. It was actually maybe 3 years or so. But again, him and my grandmother, 50 plus years together, you know. And so listening to your story, I could relate. I mean, it's not my father, it's my grandfather, but I was, again, like any good Cuban, you know, raised by the grandparents too.
Yeah.
And there was just something there that was, you know, just listening to your family, everything that they went through, I felt I was listening to a tweak on my family history, you know, even up until that point. I know that you are 12 years younger than your sister, which means that by the time you came around, your family was, for lack of a better way of saying it, like pretty ensconced in this country. You know, it wasn't, they had, you know, I mean, they were still going through their struggles, obviously, but they were here. It wasn't like recién llegado or anything like that. And you're a California Cuban, which, as we've said on our show, is very different than a Miami Cuban. East Coast, West Coast, you guys. I mean, I'm more relatable to a Jersey Cuban than an LA Cuban, even though I love y'all.
Sure.
But
I get it.
But it's very different. How did you feel growing up? You know, with your parents both being from Cuba. You know, they came to this country as, you know, as adults, right? I mean, they came with their culture, their habits fully developed, and your sister was older, so she also had lived in Spain when your parents left Cuba. Did you feel like, did you go through that, like a rebellion phase of saying, you know what, yeah, I'm Cuban, but whatever, I'm not gonna listen to Benny Moré, I'm not gonna do all that? Or did you feel like you always just understood where they were coming from? I know it's a really long ass question.
Oh no. You know, my parents were here for 3 years before I was born, and so they had their feet planted, but not super planted.
Okay.
You know,
okay.
and so I grew up in Inglewood, in Los Angeles, and there's Latinos, and there's some Cubans, but you know, in Los Angeles, it's not all Cubans. We're not immersed. We're not the dominant minority.
Right.
You guys are in Miami, or maybe even
In
in New Jersey.
Yeah,
in Jersey. But I don't know. I grew up, we'd go to La Panaderia, we'd go to El Barbero and hang out with a bunch of old Cuban guys and talk about baseball, you know. Or sometimes we'd go to church, or they'd go to church a lot, and they'd go to a Cuban church. But my parents weren't really into the Cuban clubs. Those were huge in Los Angeles.
Okay. They didn't go to those.
They didn't go to, maybe they did at the beginning, and then my dad would always be like, you know, he'd always make, see that guy's watch, he can't pay for it. Like, for some reason.
I would have...
You know, he'd be like that. I'm like,
no tiene donde caer muerto, pero, you know.
Yeah. And so that was always, but my parents at the same time so proud of being Cuban, where I almost joked that my dad's almost like a Cuban supremacist, just thinking that Cubans are the best at everything. My dad would have outlandish claims, like he'd be like, okay, best baseball players, best chess players, best ballerinas. Puerto Ricans took music from us and they stole our rum. All those things that Cubans always say. But then he would say, ¿sabe el apellido Wilson? Sí, papi. Es un apellido cubano.
Wait, espérate, ¿cómo?
Wilson. Papi, ¿cómo es el apellido Wilson? Es cubano. Niño es cubano. Eso tipo. Like, and he would just like have these far off theories where I'd be like, what are you even talking about?
And now I'm picturing Castaway much differently.
I know, yeah. Well, it floats. So,
exactly. I don't know. Maybe that's why they built the raft.
But But I always grew up very proud of it. But my parents never really shoved it down my throat. They were just,
Okay.
we just Cuban. We watched Cuban TV. We listened to Alvarez Guedes all the
Oh, I
time.
love Abigail.
But
Abigail.
we listened so much, and and Tres Patines, stuff like that. And I just grew up around that stuff. But I wasn't super into and we had Cuban family friends. Right. But it wasn't like that big of a part of the community. And when I went to school, there was a handful of Cuban kids across the whole school. Right. But a lot of my friends were everything. They were white, Mexican, Salvadorian, Colombian, Black. Like it was very mixed. So it wasn't like a whole, like in Miami, you feel like you're immersed in it.
Yeah.
Where I wasn't. I mean, I was immersed in the fact that I spoke Spanish with my parents all the time, and I drank la terba. And all that stuff, and I knew I was a specific culture, and I knew of it and proud of it. But I never had a moment where I was like, I'm sick of this Cuban stuff. I was just like, oh, I'm just happen to be from this culture that my parents are.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. No, it does. It does answer the question because DJ, he's not here right now, but he said it on a couple occasions. And again, knowing him for over 30 years, I was there for this. We grew up in Miami, so he went through a phase where he kind of rebelled against oh yeah, I'm Cuban, but like not that Cuban, or I'm not that,
not one of those,
right? And I think right, or one of those people. But I think it's also the interesting is the flip, because you weren't so immersed in it in every single damn aspect of your life, every second of the day, when you stepped outside the house, even. That maybe you did appreciate it in a different way. Whereas I think here at some point, it's just. Even if your family doesn't, it's just everywhere. That at some point, maybe you kind of say like, you know what, I'm just going to go try this other thing and I'm going to go be goth for 10 minutes, just to do something else. So it makes sense to me, though, that because you weren't just 24/7 surrounded by it outside of the house anyway.
Yeah, I think I was always very proud of it. I never tried to escape Cuban culture because I love it. I think I'm so proud of it. But I did rebel against my parents' politics, which
we all have to. We all kind of have to, and it's a delicate ass line because they left for political reasons, so we gotta toe that line. Yeah. All roads lead to communism.
I know. I mean, and so when I went to Berkeley for college, my parents were like, "There he goes." I went to the most liberal of all the schools.
Socialista.
I know. And I would be naive. I was like, Papi, have you read the Communist Manifesto? And he's like, ay, coño,
carajo, leerlo. He lived it.
I know. But I was naive. I didn't know. I was like, Marx has a lot of good points, Dad. And he's like, well, just stupid. Where I know, in theory, in school, you're like, oh, this sounds great. And then the way it was applied in Cuba was clearly a nightmare.
Exactly. So, yeah. But it yeah, I can relate to that. I'm still relating to that. Yeah. No, it's interesting, but I think nowadays, it is what it. You kind of almost. I mean, and it's gonna sound horrible in this day and age, but it's like, you try to educate them, but you also have to make certain allowances for their experiences. Which I wasn't there. I didn't know what they experienced. I don't know what they lived through, and so I can't force them to change their mind because all of our opinions are based on our experiences. I know. And it's hard. It's
really hard. But it's so funny when I went to Cuba and then I went to the Revolution Museum. I got like physically, I almost had a panic attack because I was like,
wow,
this is crazy. Like this is like Disney, like a bootleg Disneyland for communism or whatever. You see like Che, like a bad Che mannequin, just like this, and you're like, what is this? And like it's so skewed and stuff. And I thought I was gonna come back, like Jeb Bush over here. So you know what I mean? I thought I was gonna come back like a Republican because in that moment I was like, yo, this is bullshit. So I can't imagine having my whole adult life until I was 30 years old or something, growing up there under those circumstances where my father was, in the sugarcane camps in a work camp and, tortured and all this stuff. Yeah. And I understand. So, you just kind of have to But at the same time, I'll still talk to my mom. My mom's more open now as she's gotten older. But I'll have conversations with my mom. I was like, Mom, that's not necessarily true. Things are kind of complicated, and just because someone says this doesn't mean they're a communist. And just because
there's a lot of gray.
There's a lot of gray area. But once you live through that trauma, it's hard to really want to even see it, because you're like, fuck it. So I understand.
Yeah. So want to switch for just a moment, something a little lighter, because after communism, everything's lighter. You're a comedian as well, obviously. I mean, that's how, this, we all, we started this conversation, like, how did this happen? And you were at Two Dope Queens and what have you. How's that been going in the time of COVID? Like, I mean, that's gotta be a little difficult.
It's funny because being a comedian is my childhood dream. It's
Really?
all I've ever wanted to do since I was a little boy. It's not like I was like, I just picked it up by accident. Like I was a funny lawyer that transitioned into doing stand-up. They're like, that deliberation was very funny. Would you consider that? I just was the funny kid in class. I wrote funny things. I just always wanted to do it. So, and it's kind of scary, honestly, that it's gone. I've been doing stand-up for 15 years.
Wow.
And this is the longest I've gone without doing stand-up in person.
Right.
And so it's a little, it's weird. I had a whole tour set up for the spring and the summer, and it's been canceled.
Oh, that sucks.
And I know. And I was like going to new cities I've never been to before. And because of the podcast and stuff. And I was so excited to meet people and talk about this stuff in person. And that's gone. So right now you just kind of have to transition. And a lot of comics were like, I'm not going on Zoom. I'm not doing Instagram Live or FaceTiming anything. And I was like, I just had to keep on doing comedy. So I was like, I'll take it. Like, it's not ideal, but I'll do it. And so since the beginning, like the first week, I've just kind of been doing shows on Zoom. And
that's cool.
So some comedy clubs or some comedy shows have put together shows that you do, and it's not the same because you don't get to see people, and it's weird like this. You don't get the warmth of the crowd, and you don't even get to hear them. So sometimes I'm just feeling like they mute it, and so my wife's in the other room thinking I'm a lunatic and shit because I'm just like there's no response, and I'm like saying stuff. But it's just something we got to do. I mean, I am not going to stop doing comedy, and I'm not going to. I'll adapt to this format for as long as I have to, and just because I just have. It's just in me. Like I just have to keep on performing, and I'll notice some weeks I will have not even a Zoom show, and I'll feel myself feeling a little off, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, it's because I haven't done a show. Like I'm used to doing shows 4 or 5 nights a week.
Wow, that's a lot.
More. Yeah, that's how you get good at it. My friend Sam tweeted that it takes 10 years to get good at stand-up and 2 weeks to get bad at it. So it's going to be weird. It's going to be exciting that we're all going to suck at comedy when it comes back. Like, everyone's going to be terrible. Even the best ones. Seinfeld's going to suck.
Even playing field. Woohoo!
yeah. So I'm like, what you guys, Chappelle? Yeah, me too. But I'm adjusting, and I'm excited to get out on the road whenever that is. I know some clubs are opened already, which makes me personally a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, down here actually, I think there's already been like the Improv opened. I mean, they've minimal capacity, so it's not like they've opened up 100% and nobody can get out of their seats, and you got it's like it's very structured, but yeah, they've started opening up.
But I saw a picture of it, and I was like, a comedy club's the worst place to be. I mean, people are getting drunk, and so, so they're being a little wild. You're throwing your breath into the air, The ceilings are always low, and then you're all facing each other. I was like, this shit is terrible. It's going to be the last thing to come back. There's going to be the tattoo shops coughing in each other's mouths is going to come back before, I think stand-up is going to be, live performances might be the last thing to come back, and it's unfortunate. But, I mean, I'll be ready when it's time. I'll be rusty, but I'll be ready when it come back when it's time.
I think you'll be fine. I think, especially because you're open to like, all right, let's give this Zoom thing. I mean, hell, if you can perform for a crowd that you don't know if they like the joke or not, I'm sure you can adapt to a crowd that's actually giving you feedback.
Yeah, at least I'll know that I'm bombing.
Exactly. I used to be like, all right, course correct.
yeah.
But I hope it happens sooner than later. It's just for selfish reasons, because I hope that you make your way down to Miami.
I would love to. I've never been there at a regular club, and that would be so cool.
Well, regular club and irregular club, whichever one will have you after COVID. Definitely would love to go and see you perform live and get a chance to meet you. Thank you again for taking the time to chat with us here on Pero Let Me Tell You. One of the things that, and I've managed to not cry this entire interview, so I'm going to try to keep that going.
You're a yodong just like me.
Yo, you don't know. Like I don't know if it's this quarantine or what. Like I'm just like, oh, she dropped her ice cream. Like I'm like, it's horrible. Toco una Magdalena. But toward the end, when you're, I think it's either episode 5 or 6, when you're discussing your father's ashes, you get emotional, and your mother gets emotional, because you're saying that it makes you sad to think that that's the end of your father's story, and the fact that you created this podcast, your father's story and your family's story actually will probably never really be gone, and that's something that I, on behalf of, oh God, here I go. On behalf of everyone, who's gone through something similar or somebody who can relate, I just want to thank you for that, because it's very universal story, and you know what? It's going to continue to touch people for years and years to come.
Well, thank you. Now you're making me do it. Thank you for listening, and that means a lot that you felt it, and I didn't know how Cubans were going to react. Honestly, I had no idea. And Cuban Americans and everything, and I'm so touched that people have been so moved by it, and that my father, someone without a Wikipedia page or any fame, his legacy can live on through this story, and touch people's hearts.
Absolutely.
And they will know how much we loved each other, and I think that's such a beautiful thing. And so, thanks for the opportunity to let me to discuss it with you and your listeners.
No, man. I mean, I keep saying it, but it's true. Thank you, because the only way that we continue this is to keep those stories alive. And you've done that. And actually, you came up in conversation last weekend. I was at a friend's house, and we were talking. She's an LA Cuban, or now she's in Miami, but she was an LA Cuban. And she was saying, she's like, oh yeah, I was listening to this guy's podcast. I don't know if you've heard of it, Scattered. And I was like, yeah, kind of heard of it. Talking to him next week. And she's like, it's the first time, because she grew up in LA as a Cuban. She's like, it's the first time that I heard somebody's Cuban American growing up experience that she could relate to.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So
that's so awesome.
You are reaching people, my friend. You are definitely reaching people.
You. Yeah. Tell her hello for me.
I absolutely will. Absolutely will. All right, man. Well, thank you so much for stopping by to chat.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All
Have a good one.
Likewise, man.
And we're back.
Oh my God.
That was interesting.
It was.
Now I feel like super bad about not being in the interview.
Well, I told him the reason you couldn't make it was because you were having emergency dental procedure, and literally the first words out of his mouth were like, "Oh, so that's a true muelero right there." Yeah. Like, and I was like, I guess so.
Yeah.
But he was absolutely fantastic, and you could probably hear it in the interview. There were a couple times there where I choked up, and he kind of choked up, and it's I can't recommend it enough. And there, we're tagging him and the podcast in this week's promo on IG, and we also will have a link in the details section of this episode.
Awesome. So we're thirsty.
We are thirsty.
So I'm giving a gasless Coke.
Oh, well, I'm giving a gasful Coke?
I'm giving a gasless Coke.
Okay, so do you want to go first?
I want to go first because we want it on a positive note.
That's true.
Right. So, and I know you're going to be opinionated about this. So,
oh, God.
And I do want to hear what you have to say about this. I'm giving my gasless Coke to Leah Michelle.
Okay, I will listen. I will hear you out.
Apparently, it's come out one by one that she was a nasty little girl when she was on the set of Glee.
Oh, but I knew that.
Oh, I didn't know that. Because
I had always heard that.
I know she's big on Broadway, right?
She did. So she did Spring Awakening. And I think after that, she never went back to Broadway. Or at least not like in a...
But is she like a big musicals person?
Because that's where she got her start. She got her start on Broadway. And then, but like, you know, maybe one or two productions. And then she did Glee. And then after that, she did Scream Queens. And
I had never heard from her outside of the realm of Glee.
No, I've always heard she was not.
And, you know... When one person says you're horrible, maybe you could be like, well, maybe you just had beef with that person. Right. When two people say you're horrible, well, maybe
they were friends with the person you had to beef
with.
But
when 3, 4, 5 people, you know, more and more people start coming out and say that you're an awful human being, then you need to like maybe
check yourself. Yeah.
Check yourself and look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And like the allegations of her being like nasty are terrible.
Oh yeah, and again, like I said, I've heard of it since the show. Really, you always heard rumors of her just not being a very pleasant human being.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, actually, I think that Ryan Murphy wrote her into Scream. Like, was the rumor, of course, was that he brought her to Scream Queens because, like, you know, he got to like torture her on the show. You know what I mean? And
really?
Well, not actually, but because, you know, she was one of the characters that was, you know, being terrorized by the thing. So he kind of brought her on to like exact his revenge on screen, if you will. So I had heard that rumor.
Has he said anything about her?
I haven't seen that he has said anything, but you know, I think also there's something to be said for when you're the creator of a show. The star probably isn't going to be a total nasty piece of work with you.
Well, but maybe he saw the behavior.
No,
because from the allegations have been that she didn't even want certain people sitting next to her at the table. It's
yeah.
Whatever, Leah Michelle.
Yeah.
Like,
I will say I've always heard that, but what I and actually Amber Riley, who played Mercedes on the show, came out and said this. You know, when she's like, I'm only going to speak about this once, and this is it. She's like, you know, she was not nice to me, blah blah blah, whatever. What she did say, and the reason that this came out,
I really like her. I think she was like my favorite character.
Amber Riley,
yeah,
she's phenomenal. One of the things that the reason I don't have an issue with it coming out, whatever, she's a bitch, but I have an issue with the fact that the person who where this all started from was because Leah Michelle put out a Black Lives Matter type of thing, and one of her former co-stars used that as like the platform to say, oh, you treated me like crap, blah 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 blah, and it's like, and when I read that, it's funny because, again, having known the history, right, in my mind I was like, but I don't think she treated you bad because you were black.
Right, but
she treated you bad because she treated everybody
so she's
bad.
An equal opportunity bitch.
Right. She's just a bitch.
Right.
Like,
I thought that for a second, but then I also thought, I'm like, this girl was probably so traumatized by Leah Michelle so that when she sees her posting this like PC bullshit, she's like, yeah, but that is bullshit.
But you don't infer somebody's racist. I mean, that's a harsh allegation.
I understand.
That's a harsh allegation that even cost her a sponsorship with HelloFresh.
With the girl who called her out?
Leah Michelle got dropped immediately from HelloFresh.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that.
And the release from HelloFresh was, we don't tolerate any type of like racist or bigoted behavior.
Right. But that's the angle that I saw it. Mm-hmm. I thought, you know, maybe if she isn't a racist,
I mean, maybe she is. I don't know her.
You know, but you know, again, she was an equal
opportunity bitch. Yeah.
You know, you know those.
She's an EOB.
And but I think that this girl was probably just so like, oh,
how dare you?
Still, so many years later, because Glee has been out of production for like.
Glee started in 2009, so it's been over 10 years since it started.
But
and
she
this
was
girl
in the cast
came in
later.
Yeah.
But at least 6-7 years after production, that she still has so much angst,
esa rabia,
then it must have been for a pretty legitimate reason, you know?
Oh, I'm not taking it away from her, but I just
yeah, it's like, oh man, Leah Michelle and her two colors. With that said, do you know what my favorite? And I loved Glee. I
watched all of it.
I kind of fell off the bandwagon when they started changing the characters, but the first like 3 seasons, I ate that up. You know,
you don't even like musicals,
and I don't. But it was so good. It was so good. You know what? My favorite, I think, performance of Glee is actually with her, and it's not even because it's with her. I loved because I just thought it was so cleverly and perfectly done. When in the Britney episode, she sung the Only Exception.
Oh,
Because it was so cleverly done. Like, it's the Britney episode, but that's the only exception. Well, I don't need to explain it. If you don't get it, you don't get it. Yeah. But I thought it was so clever. I'm like, man, Ryan Murphy se la comió.
He's on his shit. He knows what he's doing.
That song. Anyway, whatever. We won't get into it. Okay, well.
So Leah Michelle gets your gasless soda.
It's a gasless. And BITCH.
Yes, she's a gasless EOB. Equal opportunity bitch. We've coined it. My soda has lots of gas, actually. It's a very gassy soda.
Oh.
And I'm going to give it to somebody who actually, you know what, if you look at her, she kind of has a bottle shape. And we are going to celebrate her and love her for it. I'm going to give it to Amara la Negra.
Oh, yes. Haven't we given it to her before?
We may have, but I'm just going to go ahead and give it to her again because why not? You know, obviously during everything that's going on, you know, she's an Afro-Latina woman. She's
so beautiful.
She is gorgeous. Like that drop dead.
Like everything
gorgeous
about her is beautiful. Like she has such a beautiful skin and like the skin
her
tone,
lips, her
body,
eyes,
her eyes are striking. Like
just everything. Like her,
and she looks good. Like she, you know, because you've seen her dress up in like different styles. Like she looks good in all of them. Like,
yeah. There's nothing that like que le queda mal.
Yeah.
But you know, obviously in the last couple of days, you know, she's been very active and very vocal. But she's using her platform not only to say, you know, the Black Lives Matter platform, as it were, but she's really sharing a lot of other stories. But what, you know, about other instances where, oh, this black person died, you know, that ruled as an accident, and it's like, no, it wasn't. Like you look at the evidence and it wasn't. But she's also trying to strike the right balance, because her Instagram has not become that at the expense of sharing herself. Mm-hmm. You know, she shares positive things, she posts messages, she, you know, puts like that video which I freaking love about the little black baby and the little white baby like running towards each other, and you know, she's really trying to strike the right balance of it. And I think, you know, as somebody who probably her whole life has had to, you know, toe several lines, you know, she's Latina, she's black, she's American, she's I think the perfect chord of how to, you know, you were saying earlier, I don't really feel like laughing, I don't really feel that it's just so heavy, but after a certain point you kind of need to take that breath. And I think she's finding the perfect way to do it and still being herself. Yeah. So, my last soda goes to Amara.
You know what I love about her? That when, you know, because I've seen her on The Breakfast Club, she's so Miami.
Oh, yeah. Like, I love it.
Like, I love that she's so Miami and her accent is so Miami, and I love it. I absolutely love it. It's like, man, she is like...
I'm from Miami, and what?
If the Miami accent embodies someone, it's like her.
And let me tell you something: we could do a lot worse than being embodied by Amara la Negra.
We're doing pretty good.
They're pretty damn good.
Anyway, bueno, this was a bit of a heavy episode, but you know, it's conversations that we need to have, and you know, sometimes they're not pleasant, and sometimes they're hard, but not having these conversations, I feel, is one of the reasons
the way to go.
Why we have the problems that we have.
Sure.
So, anyway, that's episode 113. We hope everybody listened, laughed, and learned. And remember to grab your pastelito, your croqueta, and your jupiña. And thank you so much, everybody. Have a great weekend. Pero Friday. See you all next time.
Yes, cuídense, mi gente. Bye. Pero Let Me Tell You is co-hosted by Darian Borges and Ismaeliano, produced by Ismaeliano, and our theme, Pero Let Me Tell You Freestyle, is composed by Michael Angelo Lomlaplex, the official gay guy. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes.